We can't heal, we can't grow, we can't evolve unless we are doing the work. So, what is the work? And, I talk to people all the time about conscious evolution. And to me, if you just think about the words, conscious meaning that we are aware, we are conscious, we are putting intention into how we think, how we approach life. Consciousness is that. How we evolve is that we have the intention to move forward. We have the intention to move beyond something. But we can't heal, grow, or evolve unless we are participating in that whole thing. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this whole thing of how the human condition works with the soul and vice versa. Because again, I am here to help you understand how the soul works and how it is that in everyday life, our soul is there. But if we were to become more active in understanding why we were here to grow, heal, or evolve, then basically we would be doing the work. So, okay, the human condition is brutal. I can't tell you how many times I've said that to people in the last several months. I'm realizing more and more and more. I sit and I hold space for people as they are experiencing the human condition and trying to bumble their way through or navigate it. And yet, basically, it is a brutal process when you really step back and realize everything that people go through, everything that humans go through. It's difficult, it's challenging. But then when you look at it from a soul perspective, you realize everything we go through in the human condition is there for our souls to evolve. And so we can't grow and evolve unless we're putting some sort of conscious action into it. So I want to talk through this a little bit. And like I said, the human condition, man, it throws things at us. We have so many different challenges that could come our way. And as a practitioner, a psychologist, I've been in the field about 39 years. When I think about that, I think about how much space I've held, how many topics I've gone through with people, how many topics I've held space for and helped them heal and helped them disentangle all of their different kinds of concerns. And I think about it in terms of this human condition is here for us to evolve. This is why I do this work. I want to walk through a couple different things that, I talk about with clients day to day. And, the first thing is, and I'm going to go back to Einstein on this, is that whole idea is that if we do the same thing over and over again, it is basically the definition of insanity. In other words, we can go through the same process over and over and over again and become frustrated for why things aren't changing. But all we have to do is put a little conscious action into that process in order to alter the path, in order to alter the state of that process and how it is going. So, do you want to stay in that cycle or do you want to change something? And that is where doing the work comes in. So, I want to talk through there's actually in the psychological world, there is a stages of change model that I have actually kind of gone back through and added some of the soul side to. But I'm going to walk you through these stages. There's 6 stages. And then I'm going to walk you through the soul stages that go with it. And so it's by Prochaska and DiClemente. So if those of you who are interested in the research and kind of being a nerd like I am, I really like knowing what the models are and where the research comes from. But Prochaska and DiClemente, many, many years ago, about 50 years ago, created this model called the trans-theoretical change model. And what they did is they observed the process of what most people go through in their evolution. Now, I use the word evolution. They were talking about change and changing behaviors and changing thoughts. And so this model has come in so handy in so many ways. And in my health and wellness days, in my psychological work, in teaching different kinds of groups and teaching different kinds of residents and medical students and nurses. So the 6 stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. So if you just think about those words, it kind of tells the story a little bit, but I'm going to go through each one of those a little bit to help you understand it even more. So pre-contemplation is literally pre-contemplation. It's before you even have the thought that something needs to change. So it is basically when we have not become awakened to whatever it is that needs to change. That is where denial is. That is basically where avoidance is. That is where, well, avoidance could be a little bit further in that we know that there's something we should change. So there's enough awareness there, but we haven't actually taken action on it. But the whole pre-contemplation is that we don't even have a clue that we need to change. From the soul side of this, that is basically, again, prior to the awakening of that particular item on our soul's agenda. So it could be learning that we decide, we want to have better relationships. Well, we have to have the awareness that we need to work on having better relationships before we will actually work on having better relationships. So the pre-contemplative stage is that whole idea is that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we need to change something. We don't have a negative enough impact going on that's instigating or initiating change on our part. So pre-contemplation when it comes to the soul side is, to me, not being quite awakened to that particular aspect of your evolution. The next stage is contemplation. Now, contemplation is, oh gosh, I think I might need to change that. Wow, this is happening over and over again. Maybe there's something I can shift or alter to change the outcome. So the contemplation stage is when you're sitting there thinking through, okay, wow, okay, I can see why I might need to do something. I can see why I might need to do some work, as they say, to get into a different place, but you're not quite ready to make the change. Now, in my psychological practice, lots of people have so many different things that they're coming in, they're wanting to change, but they're just not ready to do it. They're just going through the cycle. They're guilting themselves for not doing it. They're shaming themselves for not doing it. They're stuck because they haven't really changed something. Or it could be sort of a lifestyle factor. They don't have the time. They don't have the awareness that they need to change something now. So the contemplative stage can take a long time. From the soul side, this is actually very fruitful in terms of conscious evolution because that's when the light starts to go on. That is when you start to have the aha moments. That's when you start to see where dots connected to get you to the place that you were, and maybe how the dots will connect to get you to the next stage. So, conscious evolution really starts with that contemplative stage. It starts with that, oh gosh, I really at a deeper level am feeling the impact of not changing. So something is stirring within me that is initiating maybe a little bit more motivation or a little bit more discomfort so that I can go through that process of changing. Now, many of you have heard me say over and over and over again that we don't change unless we're tired enough of ourselves or our situations. And so this contemplative stage is a really important part of our evolution because we have to become uncomfortable enough to exit pre-contemplative stage, go into the contemplative stage and go, whoa, okay, I really need to do something differently here. But it can still take a little while or a long while to get us there. So that discomfort has to build from the soul level. Our soul might have to be uneased enough for us to go, wow, from a human side, I need to start changing my behavior. So again, contemplative stage is when the human side of you is starting to think about what needs to change. The soul side of you is starting to say, wow, yeah, this is not comfortable anymore. I really need to do something different. I don't feel good in my own space anymore, and I need to start shifting. The next stage is preparation. So from a human level, a lot of times, a behavioralist will walk through the different specific things a person might need to shift in their life or change in their life in order to see a measurable outcome. So in other words, when I used to do weight management work at the university, when I was a professor at the medical school, we basically would go through step by step by step. What is it that we can do to help you change one single behavior within the weight management rubric so that you can be successful? And there's all of these estimations on how long it takes for a person to change a simple behavior or a complex behavior or a lifestyle. And, it can go from 3 days for a very, very simple behavior to 3 months, 3 years, depending on how complex the behavior or the lifestyle is. So there's all of these different levels within these levels of change that are important to think about. But if you think about preparing, the human side of you is having to do some conscious work in order to go, wow, okay, so in order for me to exercise more often, I need to keep a gym bag in my car. Well, what is it going to take for me to get a gym bag in my car and keep clean clothes in there all the time? And how am I going to remember the gym bag? And so there's very specific human steps you need to take in order to get yourself to actually follow through with the behavior. So the preparation stage from the human side is one of those things where, again, it's very human. It's one of those things where you just literally have to think through the steps. The preparation stage from the soul side is different as far as I'm concerned, because that's sometimes where we have to do the deeper work. We have to look at soul wounds. We have to look at how those energetic wounds, whether it's from a neglectful upbringing or perhaps an abusive upbringing or relationship, it could be from past life kind of work that we need to do in order to help you prepare for yourself to change in some way. It could be soul realignment work. It could be dealing with, again, it looks like it's from the human side, healing some of the emotional wounds, but it's the energetic nature of how deeply those wounds have impacted you at the soul level that are keeping you stuck, keeping you from moving forward, keeping you from kind of dislodging yourself from that stuck place in the beginning. So again, these can look very similar, but they're very different in terms of the level of the healing, the level of the preparation. So instead of doing the specific steps from a behavioral perspective, from the preparation stage and the human side, sometimes, oftentimes, the preparation work that you need to do from the soul side is going through the deeper healing, going through that release process of how those wounds, how those emotions are stuck in you. And also sometimes identifying how those things became stuck in the first place. So again, it could be past life work that you need to do in order to prepare you for not only human change, but also for the next stage in your evolution. So I hope that's starting to make some sense. The next stage is the action stage. So from a human side, the action stage is, okay, I'm going to the gym. I'm getting that gym bag in my car every day. I'm drinking my water. I'm looking at my nutrition and I'm changing my diet. So you're jumping in, you're doing things different. Now, from the soul side of that, you may be doing that as well, except that there's a layer of really looking at the discomfort that's coming along with making those changes. Because I tell people our human evolution is really very much embedded in our soul's evolution. But from a conscious perspective, we have to have that soul awareness of going, wow, my soul is not comfortable anymore. My soul does not want to stay the same as a human. And in order to change myself as a human, I also need to be aware that my soul is evolving at the same time. Again, it looks very embedded, it looks very similar, very layered together, but it's a higher order awareness that basically your action stage over here, you are consciously realizing I need to evolve beyond what was keeping me stuck. I need to evolve beyond my discomfort. I need to sometimes evolve beyond, and this is the action stage, I need to evolve beyond the identity that I had as a human in those old behaviors, in those old mindsets, in those old awarenesses, and basically go to the next level. So the action stage can look, again, either very similar or very different, but it's all about the level of consciousness. It's about pushing yourself forward. It's about being propelled forward, and your discomfort, basically that sensation of discomfort of staying the same, is your soul's way of pushing you forward in order to take action. It is not just the human side of you. Otherwise, you would have changed a long time ago. A lot of times, your soul has to be either activated or aware, or you need to be aware of your soul in order to take conscious change, if that makes any sense. So, really take action on that conscious change. So the action stage can look very different as well. So it could just be that you're going through and changing different behaviors, changing mindsets. Over here on the soul side, the action stage is all about knowing that you are evolving beyond the old ways, that you are putting yourself into this place of engaging with your soul in a different way to take you to that next level, if that again makes sense. So take some time to let this sink in. The next stage of the changes, the stages of change model, is maintenance. This is probably the hardest. It is probably the hardest stage of change, because from a human side, we always regress to the mean. We regress to our old patterns. We regress to what is familiar to us. And so a lot of times that is where behavioralists really want to step in, is making sure that the new behaviors that a person is trying to work on stick. So this is where, again, you have to do some mental work of, okay, what is it that I need to strategically do to make sure I maintain those behaviors? What is it that I need to plan ahead for? What is the cognitive or mental work you need to do to stay moving forward? And so that's where, again, sometimes you need a coach, sometimes you need an accountability partner or something else on the human side to keep that ball rolling. In the maintenance phase for the soul part of it, that is where the conscious evolution is also key, because you need to stay aware of the fact that you are moving forward. But if you don't stay with it, if you don't stick in that process, that you are going to go back to the old human. And that is usually what I try to encourage people to consider, is that if you don't get it right this time, whether it's in this chapter of your life or in this lifetime altogether, you're going to revisit the cycle. You are going to revisit this whole thing all over again, because that's how this goes. We will revisit our old ways until we have officially evolved beyond them. To me, the evolution part is the soul part. The behavior change part is the human part. But until we get to that point where we have evolved beyond enough of the old behaviors where we don't even entertain those behaviors anymore, then we haven't done the soul work. We have not gotten to the point where we've actually worked at this from a soul level. And so think about all of the behaviors that you have tried to change, but you keep cycling back, cycling back, cycling back. And that is where I think it is so important to get to know yourself from the soul level and understand the soul aspects of change and evolution, because there's a vast difference in how successful a person is going to be if they're just changing their human behaviors, thoughts, mindsets, versus if they're changing those humans, thoughts, and mindsets basically from a soul level. You're going to realize there's something more at stake. You're going to realize that if you don't evolve, if you don't, and I'm going to keep using that word, if you don't go through that conscious evolution process and stick with it and do the work to stay there, you will never get to the next level. You will never evolve from that old you. You will not evolve from that old identity of who you are. So the maintenance stage is so important for our soul's evolution. And it is a very slippery slope in many ways, because the human condition is challenging because it is so brutal. It distracts us. It puts things in our way. It throws obstacles in our way for our soul's evolution. Sometimes it's people that are there to kind of disrupt your evolution. Maybe they don't want you to change because they want things to stay the same. Maybe it is that, they're threatened by your own evolution because they're not moving forward. And so a lot of times they will disrupt the process or sabotage your growth. Sometimes we sabotage our own growth because it is maybe we're afraid of a new identity. Maybe we're afraid of evolving beyond those old emotions. So there's a different level of change that is happening when you are doing soul work, but it is much more sustainable and much more permanent if you involve the soul in the process. I'm going to go on to the next stage. The next stage is the relapse stage. So the relapse stage is exactly what it says, meaning that, whoa, I am going backwards. I am revisiting these old behaviors. I'm losing ground on what I've changed. I'm not staying where I wanted to be, all of that. And so that's the human side of this. The soul side of this is, and I'm going to show you a cycle in just a minute that hopefully will help you understand that if we're really evolving, we never really go back to square one again. But I'm going to help you understand that in just a moment. From the soul side, the relapse stage is really about that reset that we take to get us to the next level. And again, it's that conscious awareness of saying, wow, I am losing ground. I'm uncomfortable about this. What do I want to do about this? Now, here's where I want to bring in a new cycle that the Prochaska and DiClemente model does not discuss. And as far as I know, nobody else really talks about it in this way. But I want you to consider kind of the amplitude. And what I mean by amplitude is the levels of change we go through in each one of those cycles as we try to initiate that process. So consider this. If this was baseline, if this is where you started in the very, very beginning, before, like right when you were becoming contemplative about changing, so you knew that some things had to change, whether you were working with someone or not, here's how this always goes. So here's your baseline. You decide you're going to change something through that contemplative and preparation and action mode. And what you do is you start that process of changing and you start to make those behavior changes and you start to come up and you're like, wow, this is feeling better. This is feeling better. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm slipping. I'm going backwards. I'm not going where I need to be. That process, I think personally, from a soul evolution process, We actually have to go backwards in order to go forward. And I'm going to keep talking about this and then I'm going to explain that a little bit more. So here's what happens. We start changing the behaviors, we start slipping, we start slipping, we start slipping. We think, oh, geez, we're all the way back to the beginning. We're not back to the beginning because if you have learned something consciously along the way, you learn some new skills, you learn some new techniques, you have more tools in your toolbox, you have more knowledge or wisdom. It could be knowledge about health and behavior and or nutrition or exercise or whatever it might be. If you have learned something, you can never go back to square one. So think about this again. So you have not gone back to square one. There's now a space between where you were in that previous contemplative mode to where you are now. And what the goal is to keep cycling up until it becomes basically that evolutionary path. You have changed your path when you get to a certain point. So I'm going to go through this process a little bit more. So here we are. We start going up. We're like, okay, this is great. Oh no, I'm losing ground. And then you pause because you have to remember, what was it that worked the last time for me to do the work to start on that upward slope? You have to use those things again and possibly gain one or two more bits of wisdom or one or two more tools. And then what do? We come up a little further. So there's more amplitude. There's a larger cycle from the bottom to the top. And then what do? We go, oh no, I'm losing ground again. I'm losing ground again. And so again, every time we cycle back down, we actually gain more wisdom. We actually gain more knowledge of, oh, okay, this is what got me off track last time. There's conscious evolution. Gosh, let me consciously determine what got me off track. Let me consciously determine what it was that made me slip down that slope again. That is more conscious evolution. That is more knowledge. That is more wisdom. So every time you go through that process of cycling up and cycling up and cycling up, you are creating more space from the very beginning when you were not contemplative, and so that you can learn along the way. So it is a cycle process, and we don't have a straight line to our evolution. And one of the things I like to tell people is that evolution never happens as fast as we'd like it to, and it never happens in a straight line. And so that's why we oftentimes cycle, and that's why we oftentimes have to cycle in order to learn more and enough to basically get that change high enough in the sky so that we are looking down and go, we are not going back down there. And so the thought is that the more we cycle up, we might be changing like how far down we came from the last time. But theoretically, the goal is to shrink the size of that loop, shrink the size of that circle so that as you loop up, it's basically getting to a point where you catch yourself sooner and you get yourself back working so you can get into that higher place. So just visually think about how many times you've tried to change a behavior and how many skills or tools or how much knowledge you had to gain in order to make it stick. And also, from a soul evolution perspective, how uncomfortable you had to be with the old you as a human in order to evolve into a new you as a soul. And that is where we look back a lot of times and go, gosh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I used to do that. That doesn't even make sense for me. This is not something I do anymore. And so that's why evolution is so hard. That's why behavior change is so hard. That's why weight loss is so hard. That's why, I don't know, anything, smoking cessation or exercise or anything is so hard, is that there's more to it than just saying, I'm going to do this. Because we have to be in that place where our souls are ready for the change and we know enough as humans in order to get there. So this is how the human condition works with the soul. And I wish more coaches and more behavioralists and more practitioners understood that it takes the human side and the soul side for most change to be sustainable. It takes both. It takes that conscious awareness of people to go, oh, wow, there is something deeper going on here. And I have to consciously decide I want to get to a new level. It's not just that you want to change a behavior. That's just the human stuff. It's that you want to get to a new level so that that old behavior doesn't even make any sense to you anymore, that it's not even relevant anymore. So again, this is where it gets so tricky because as practitioners, we are not taught anything. Even if you were taught the changes, the stages of change model, you might not have really been taught how to apply it. But if you look at it from a soul perspective, we have really not been taught to understand that there is something deeper going on when it comes to behavior change. So doing the work is a process. Doing the work is something we have to do in order to get there. I'm going to give you a few examples of doing the work because that will help you put it into the context of being human and how this stuff works. So I have a client I've worked with for a while, emotional eating, and there are there are so many different approaches to dealing with emotional eating. One of my things is talking about feeding the soul, not the body. And the whole idea is a lot of times our emotional eating comes from the fact that either we are unhappy underneath the surface, there's some emotion that hasn't been dealt with, there's some unresolved kinds of, wounding of hurt or whatever it might be. And it is not unusual at all, especially with binge behavior, to cycle and not get where you want to be because you've got to do the deeper work. You have to realize that this is a higher level kind of thing. This is, to me, a soul consciousness awareness kind of thing that you actually want to change the behavior. And so I had a client not too long ago that was cycling through another kind of bout of emotional eating, and it wasn't quite binging, but it was emotional eating. And this person doesn't like to deal with emotion. And she knows that she doesn't like to deal with emotion. She doesn't like to journal. She doesn't like to put herself into that place where she actually has to stay with what is actually underneath the surface. And it's not fun. This human condition is not fun. And boy, there are so many different challenges within the human condition, whether it's relationship stuff or work stuff or health stuff, whatever. But basically, we've talked for years about how important it is for her to stay with emotions, how important it is for her to stay in that place where she can attend to the emotions. Well, an episode happened not too long ago, and um, she wanted to basically go to the doctor and get a medication to help her focus on the behavior. Now, the thing I told her almost immediately is a medication is only going to help so much. You have to do the work. You have to do it. You're not going to get where you want to be unless you do the work. The beautiful thing is she understood what I said when I was that direct, and I said, you are not going to get anywhere with the medication. You are going to have to do the work. Very next session she comes in, she had done a ton of journal writing. She had done a ton of talking to people about this. She had done a lot of understanding of what the wounds were that were keeping her stuck, what was happening within her. And so it was just beautiful because I got to hear her do the work. And this is what I'm all about. I'm here to help people do the work. And yet sometimes you have to nudge them forward in doing it. So that is just one example. Oftentimes I have people coming in with relationship issues, and I don't do couples work anymore for multiple reasons. And the main reason is that if one party within the couple is wanting to do the work and the other party is not doing the work, you're not going to get anywhere. And so for me, it's one of those things where I will help a person individually as long as I can, but then I will refer them to a couples therapist once the other partner is ready to do the work. It is not unusual at all for one person to be ready to do the work and ready to do their own healing, and the other person is dragging their heels or is chastising the other person because they don't want to go to therapy. So it takes two to tango. It absolutely takes two to tango. But that's the thing. If one party is not going to do the work and the other party is, that relationship is not going to match. So how do you make a relationship work? You do the work. You pay attention to what you need to do within that union in order to do the work. What about, I have so many people coming to me for life purpose and soul purpose and trying to figure out what it is that they are supposed to be doing in this world. And this is mostly from a soul healing perspective. And the same is true. I still need to walk them through those processes of soul change, but I also have to help them realize that it is all about the soul's awareness. So getting them in touch to do the work to get them, number one, in touch with their souls, but to start to hear themselves from that level, to start to hear themselves from that higher order level of themselves that is actually going to guide their human change as well. But many times they can't get there unless they align with themselves from the soul perspective. So doing the work is both human and soul-based. It is intertwined. It is multi-layered. It is interwoven, and we cannot really expect ourselves to get where we really say we want to be unless we do both. We have to change the human behaviors, and we have to be aware of how the soul evolves in general. And I had another client just yesterday talking about how frustrated she is with her parent, with her father. And it's one of those things where he has not been changing, he hasn't been growing. The old behaviors that were cumbersome and challenging and offensive as a young person are still there. And now that he's elderly, it's very difficult for her to spend time with him because she's come so far in her own evolution. And yet it's one of those things where she goes back into the household, she sees how unevolved this person is and how it's negatively impacting her still. And so from an energetic perspective, it's just weighing her down. And that is another perspective of how it is that someone is not doing their work and how it affects someone who is doing their work. And, again, I can go over many, many, many kinds of examples of how doing the work changes your life. But it's one of those things where, again, I just wanted to help you understand how the human condition interacts and interplays with the soul. And I tell people it's a complex interplay, but once you understand that your soul's evolution is completely dependent on your ability as a human to change and grow and your willingness to change and grow, but that the key, the absolute key to changing and evolving at a higher level is really that conscious evolution, becoming very aware of the soul language, becoming very aware of what is stuck from a deeper level, what it is about you as a being, as a soul that is keeping you stuck, and what it is you're here to evolve beyond. And I could talk about this till I'm blue in the face because this is my thing. This is what I'm here to do, is help you understand this from a higher perspective. So I would love to hear your thoughts, love to hear your questions, love to hear your comments and responses, because until we get to that point where we understand that the soul is present in every single thought, every single action, every single reaction, and we learn to use that to our benefit in our change process, we're probably not going to be able to change sustainably in the way that we think we are. Or so this is again why this is my gig. This is why I think it's so important. So again, ancient wisdom for the modern soul, bringing the understanding back of how the soul works, regardless of your religious basis, because the human is still the human and the soul beneath it is still there. So the energetic part of us, that part that goes on is beckoning us, trying to get us to do our work. And yet we have to listen. We have to be willing to listen to what it is that we are here to do. So again, have a wonderful day. I hope this is helpful for you, and more will be coming soon. Bye-bye.